It's 2025. Right now. This year. The one you're living through. Maybe you're listening to this while commuting. Maybe it's late, the screen glow the only light in the room. Think about your day. Think about the news you scrolled past. Headlines flashing by. AI breakthroughs promising futures we can barely imagine. Climate summits talking targets and treaties. The latest celebrity scandal. The newest viral trend. The endless, noisy churn of information. You swipe. You tap. You absorb the surface. It's easy. It's designed to be easy. Consume the big picture, the global narrative, the shiny advancements. Move on. There's always something new vying for your attention, just a thumb flick away. But behind that noise, behind the curated feeds and the algorithmically approved chaos, there are other stories. Stories that didn't trend. Stories that flickered for a moment, a brief, unsettling spark in the digital darkness, and then vanished. Not just faded, vanished. Pulled down, pushed aside, forgotten before they could even truly register. People, real people, who woke up one morning, went about their lives, and then simply ceased to exist. No trace, no goodbye, just empty spaces where they should have been. Disappearances so clean, so absolute, they defy the messy reality of life. One moment present, the next gone, into thin air, leaving behind bewildered families, unanswered questions, and a chilling void. And crimes, not the ordinary, messy kind splashed across local news. Crimes that twisted logic itself. Events that unfolded like bad fiction. Scenarios so bizarre, so impossible seeming, that they short-circuited reason. Things that shouldn't have happened, couldn't have happened. Yet the evidence, what little there was, whispered that they did. Acts that left seasoned investigators scratching their heads, staring at walls of dead ends and contradictory clues. Crimes that mocked our understanding of how the world works. Investigations launched with grim determination, only to slam into walls. Brick walls, steel walls, walls made of silence, vanished evidence, conflicting reports, and bureaucratic fog. Leads that ran cold before they even warmed up. Whispers that died on fearful lips. Files that grew dusty not because the trail went cold, but because it hit an impenetrable barrier. Doors slammed shut. Access denied. Questions met with blank stares or official non-answers. These cases, they weren't just closed due to lack of evidence. They weren't merely shelved as unsolved mysteries, waiting for a fresh pair of eyes or a new clue. No, they were buried, deliberately, systematically, pushed down into the dark soil of forgotten things, covered over by layers of distraction, disinformation, and sheer, overwhelming indifference. Labeled too confusing, too inconvenient, too dangerous to pursue. They became inconvenient truths the world was all too happy to let slip into the shadows. Tonight we dig. We peel back those layers. We shine a light into those deliberately darkened corners. We unravel the threads of darkness the world chose to forget. The threads that lead to the vanished, the impossible crimes, the silenced investigations. We follow them into the heart of 2025's deepest, most unsettling secrets. Secrets that weren't lost to time or chance, but actively hidden. Because the truth waiting there, the truth about what really happened, about who was behind it, about why these stories were silenced, it isn't just disturbing. It isn't just tragic. It's colder than you think. Colder than the void those missing people left behind. Colder than the silence that met the investigators' pleas. It's a chill that seeps into the bones of our reality, a reminder of what can happen when darkness isn't just present, but actively cultivated. The forgotten year holds its breath. The buried truths stir. Are you ready to face what the world forgot? Why 2025? The year the doors slammed shut, so why 2025? What made this year the perfect storm for darkness to slip through, unseen, unchecked? It's tempting to think the crimes themselves were different, more brutal, more bizarre, that maybe humanity took some dark turn we missed in the headlines. But that's not it. The monsters didn't suddenly become smarter or more savage. The real horror? The lights went out. The systems we trusted to catch them, to shine a light on them, to hold them accountable, they cracked. They sputtered, and then under immense pressure they broke. Not everywhere all at once, but in critical places at critical moments. It was the year the doors slammed shut, not because the monsters were too strong, but because the locks were rusted, the guards were overwhelmed, and the keys were lost. 2025 was the year the cracks became chasms, and monsters learned to dance in the shadows they cast. Think about it. Picture your local police department. Even on a good day, they're stretched thin. Now imagine 2025. It wasn't just about chasing criminals on the streets anymore. The battlefield moved. It moved online into networks, into data streams. Police departments, big and small, found themselves drowning, not in water, but in a relentless digital flood. Cyberattacks, not the kind you hear about where credit cards get stolen. These were targeted, vicious, waves crashing against the digital walls of precincts, evidence databases, communication networks. Imagine detectives arriving at work to find their computers frozen, screens filled with gibberish code or mocking symbols. Case files encrypted, ransomware demands popping up while they were trying to trace a missing person's last phone ping. Crucial communication channels jammed during hostage situations. Critical surveillance footage corrupted just as it might have shown a suspect's face. Officers trained to chase down suspects in alleyways were suddenly thrust into a war they weren't equipped to fight, against faceless enemies halfway across the globe, whose only weapon was chaos. They were drowning, spending more time fighting digital fires than solving real-world crimes. Leads died in the digital noise. Evidence vanished into corrupted hard drives. Time, the most precious resource in any investigation, was wasted, siphoned away battling invisible attackers. And where did the physical evidence go? To the labs, the places where science is supposed to speak the truth. Fingerprints, DNA samples, ballistics, digital forensics, this is where cases are made or broken. But in 2025, these labs faced their own kind of blackout. Not necessarily a power cut, though that happened too, but a budget blackout. Funding shriveled, priorities shifted. Governments poured money into flashy new tech initiatives, global crises, anything but the quiet, essential machinery of justice. Labs ran on fumes. Equipment aged, broke down, couldn't keep up with new demands. Crucial tests faced agonizing backlogs, months, sometimes years long. Imagine a detective clutching a single vital DNA sample from a crime scene, a sample that could identify a killer or exonerate the innocent. They rush it to the lab, only to be told it'll be 6 months, maybe a year, before it can be processed. 6 months while a predator walks free. A year while a family grieves without answers. And sometimes it was worse. Budget cuts meant insufficient storage. Freezers failed. Sensitive biological evidence degraded, became useless before it ever saw a testing machine. Digital evidence storage became overloaded, corrupted. Crucial data simply evaporated. The science meant to unlock mysteries was itself locked away, starved of resources, unable to speak. Doors slammed shut before the evidence could even knock. Meanwhile, the world kept spinning faster than ever. The news cycle, already frantic, hit hyperdrive in 2025. Scandals erupted and were replaced within hours. Global crises competed for microseconds of attention. Algorithms fed us what kept us clicking, what sparked outrage or joy, rarely what demanded quiet, sustained thought. And the stories we're talking about, the vanishings, the impossible crimes, they were messy, confusing. They didn't fit into neat 90-second segments. They didn't have clear villains or satisfying resolutions. They raised uncomfortable questions, hinted at systemic failures, pointed fingers at places people didn't want pointed. So, the media, overwhelmed and chasing the next dopamine hit for its audience, moved on. Fast. A disappearance might get a day, maybe 2 of intense coverage. Then the next big thing, a political gaffe, a celebrity meltdown, a shocking tech reveal, would sweep it away. Public interest, easily distracted, followed suit. The spotlight shifted, leaving these dark, complex stories languishing in the shadows almost before the initial shock had faded. The pressure to keep investigating, to find answers, evaporated with the headlines. The monsters didn't need to hide from the light. The light simply stopped looking their way. And the justice system itself? It groaned under its own weight. Courts were backlogged years in advance. Legal loopholes seemed wider than ever, exploited by those with the resources to navigate the labyrinth. Overburdened public defenders couldn't give complex cases the time they desperately needed. Key witnesses, intimidated by the sheer strangeness of events or perhaps by unseen forces, clammed up, vanished themselves, or changed their stories. Cooperation between different jurisdictions, always tricky, became almost impossible amidst the digital chaos and resource shortages. Cases got tangled in red tape, lost in the shuffle, or simply deemed too difficult, too expensive, too weird to pursue to the end. Doors within the system itself were quietly closed and locked. This was the perfect storm, not of unprecedented evil, but of unprecedented vulnerability. Police blinded and bound by cyberattacks. labs silenced by neglect, media flashing its spotlight elsewhere, leaving the dark corners darker than ever. Justice bogged down in its own quagmire. And the public? Exhausted, distracted, scrolling past the darkness without even realizing it was there. In that chaos, in that fog of war on multiple fronts, the monsters didn't need to be superhuman. They just needed to be careful, opportunistic. They learned to move in the gaps, exploit the breakdowns, leverage the distractions. They slipped through the cracks that had become gaping holes in the walls meant to protect us. They knew the lights were flickering, the guards were looking the other way, and the alarms were disconnected. 2025 wasn't the year crime changed. It was the year our defenses failed. Spectacularly. And the news? The news told you about the cyber attacks, sure. They reported the budget cuts, maybe in dry, political terms. They lamented the slow justice system. But they never connected the dots. They never showed you the real picture. How these systemic failures weren't isolated tragedies, but interconnected fractures creating a vast, dark playground for the worst among us. They never told you how easily the monsters could dance when the music of chaos played loud enough to drown out the screams. They never told you that the doors weren't just closed, they were left wide open by our own neglect, our own distractions, our own failures. They never told you what walked through. But we're about to shine a light on the footprints left behind. Here's what the news never told you. Case 1. The Phantom of Silicon Beach imagined Silicon Beach. Not the postcard version, but the real, pulsing heart of it. Think clean lines, glass buildings reflecting the California sun, the quiet buzz of ambition thick in the air, labs humming with the future. This is where Elena Torres worked. 23 years old. Not just smart, but one of those minds. The kind that sees solutions where others see dead ends. A bioengineer. Her focus? The oldest problem, water. Dirty, salty, undrinkable ocean water. And she believed she'd cracked it. Her project wasn't just another startup pitch. It felt different, grounded, less about flashy apps, more about solving a fundamental human need. She called it Project Clearwell. The device itself, the prototype, wasn't huge. Roughly the size of a large backpack, they say. But its promise? Immense. She claimed it could take seawater, run it through this compact unit, using a novel biofiltering process she'd pioneered, and produce clean, drinkable water. Efficiently, cheaply, scalably. This wasn't just tech. It was potential salvation for coastal communities, disaster zones, places choking on thirst. She was excited. Nervous, maybe, but mostly excited. She wanted the world to see it. Not through a press release filtered by PR, not through a corporate announcement. Directly, authentically. So she decided to stream it. Live. From her own small, rented lab space tucked away in one of those shiny complexes. Just her invention, and a webcam. That night, October 17th, 2025, she went live. Just after 8 p.m. Pacific time. The title was simple. Project Clearwell, first public demo. It wasn't heavily promoted, just shared among a few tech forums, environmental groups, her own modest network. But word spread. Fast. The counter climbed. 5,000 viewers. 10,000, 20,000. People fascinated by the tech, by the potential, by the young woman calmly explaining complex biology with genuine passion. By the peak, nearly 40,000 people were watching, leaning into their screens, waiting for the moment she'd activate the device with actual seawater. Elena was in her element. She stood beside the prototype unit on a workbench. She wore practical clothes, a dark t-shirt, jeans, her dark hair pulled back. She wasn't performing, she was sharing. Explaining the core principles, pointing out components, her voice clear, focused, occasionally breaking into a warm smile. The lab behind her was what you'd expect, orderly but lived in. Notes pinned to a board, some tools neatly arranged, a laptop open displaying schematics. Normal, real. You could see the focus in her eyes, the slight flush of adrenaline on her cheeks. She was about to show the world something important. She reached for a container of seawater. Okay, she said, her voice bright with anticipation. This is it. Pacific seawater drawn this morning. Let's see what Clearwell can do. She lifted the container, poised to pour it into the unit's intake port. 40,000 people held their breath. This was the moment. Then nothing. Not darkness. Not an offline screen. The video feed remained. But what it showed was empty. The screen cleared from the digital screech and the glitch. Static? No, just the image. perfectly stable, showing the lab, the workbench, the prototype unit still sitting there, the container of seawater poised midair as if frozen, just beginning to tip. But Elena? Gone. The chair she might have been standing near? Empty. The space where she just was? Vacant. 40,000 pairs of eyes stared at an empty room. Confusion flooded the chat. What happened? Where'd she go? Is this part of the demo? Did she drop her phone? Did the stream cut? But the stream wasn't cut. It remained live, broadcasting that empty chair, that frozen container, that silent lab for another 47 seconds. 47 seconds of pure, unbroken, horrifying stillness. Then finally the feed died. Not gracefully. It just stopped. Panic set in online. Viewers called the police. They called the lab complex security. They called anyone they could think of. Within minutes, security arrived at Elena's lab door. It was locked. Standard procedure after hours. They used their override, pushed the door open. What they found, or rather, what they didn't find was the first layer of the chilling puzzle. There was no Elena. No sign of her. No sign of a struggle. Nothing knocked over. No overturned chair. No scuff marks on the floor. The container of seawater was exactly where it had been in the stream, sitting calmly beside the prototype unit, not spilled. It was as if Elena Torres had simply ceased to exist between one frame and the next, vaporized, leaving everything else perfectly, unnervingly intact. Police arrived swiftly. Silicon Beach disappearance? Live stream witnessed by 40K? This was big. They sealed the lab, started processing the scene, and that's when the second layer of unease settled in. The lab wasn't just tidy. It was spotless. Too. Spotless. Forensically sterile in a way that felt deliberate, not habitual. No fingerprints. Not just wiped, absent. On surfaces you'd expect prints, the workbench edge, the prototype casing, the laptop lid. Nothing. Like everyone who'd ever been in the room wore gloves constantly. But Elena hadn't been wearing gloves on stream. Her notes? The ones pinned to the board, the ones in open notebooks? Gone. Completely. The board was bare except for the pinholes. The notebooks were empty. Her laptop? Powered on, but blank. The hard drive wasn't just wiped. It was scoured. Overwritten with random data patterns so thoroughly, so many times, that recovering even a single byte of her original work, her personal files, her browsing history impossible. State-of-the-art forensic tools hit a brick wall. Digital dust. Her personal cloud storage? Same story. Accounts accessed just minutes after the stream died, according to login logs from the service provider. Accessed from an anonymized IP that vanished like smoke. And everything deleted. Not just deleted. Encrypted first with military-grade algorithms, then deleted. The encryption keys? Gone. Vanished into the digital void. It wasn't just hiding, it was annihilation. A complete digital erasure of Elena Torres's professional life. The prototype unit? Intact. Sitting there. Police techs examined it cautiously. It was inert. Complex circuitry, biofilters, reservoirs. But no power source connected, no activation sequence initiated. Just a sophisticated shell. They took it apart, analyzed every component. Nothing unusual beyond its design. No hidden compartments. No strange residues. Just an unfinished invention. The witness? 40,000 of them. But what did they actually see? A glitch. Then an empty room. No figure rushing in. No blur of movement. No shadow crossing the frame. Just presence. Then absence. The digital footage from the stream itself? Corrupted. The segment containing the glitch and the vanishing was a mess of digital artifacts, unrecoverable by the platform's systems. Copies viewers had tried to make? Most failed. The few partial recordings that existed showed the same glitch and the same empty aftermath. No hidden clues in the pixels. So what happened? The police investigation, already hampered by the systemic chaos of 2025 we discussed earlier, hit dead end after dead end. Kidnapping? How? In a locked lab, live on stream, with no signs of entry, struggle, or exit. Cameras in the hallway outside showed no one entering or leaving her lab door during the crucial minutes. Security logs confirmed it. Windows? Secured. Ventilation ducts? Too small. It defied physics. Accident? What kind? She vanished. No body. No evidence of fire, chemical explosion, structural failure. Nothing. Walked out. To where? The hallway cameras would have seen her. She didn't appear. And why leave everything perfectly placed, including the water container she was holding? Mental break? Run away. Possible, but vanishing that fast, that completely from a live stream? And the forensic cleansing of her digital life? That takes time, planning, skill, not the actions of someone in sudden crisis. The lack of answers pushed investigators towards motive. Why would someone make Elena Torres disappear? The nature of the vanishing was impossible, but the reason behind it felt terrifyingly plausible. Corporate espionage. This was the immediate, obvious suspect. Project Clearwell was revolutionary, potentially worth billions. It threatened existing desalination industries, water treatment giants, maybe even energy companies tied to water infrastructure. She hadn't patented it yet, wanting to perfect it first. Had someone learned the details? Seen the demo announcement? Decided her invention was too dangerous to let loose? Too valuable to leave in her hands? A competitor with deep pockets and zero ethics could potentially hire specialists capable of whatever this was. The digital wipe screamed professional. The physical wipe screamed a clean operation. But the method of the vanishing itself? That remained the terrifying, unexplainable hole in this theory. How do you snatch someone live on camera without leaving a trace? Revenge/personal grudge. Did Elena have enemies? On the surface, no. Colleagues described her as brilliant, driven, but kind. Collaborative, not prone to drama. Digging deeper revealed the usual minor academic rivalries, professional jealousies, but nothing screaming violent vendetta. Her personal life seemed quiet. No recent breakups, no public disputes, no known stalkers. Could someone have harbored a hidden, obsessive hatred? Possible. But again, the execution, the vanishing act, the digital purge, felt far beyond the capability of a disgruntled colleague or an obsessed ex. It felt surgical, something she discovered. This is the theory that sends the coldest shiver down the spine. What if Project Clearwell wasn't just about water purification? Bioengineering is complex, manipulating biological systems. What if, in her work, Elena stumbled onto something else? A side effect? A fundamental biological principle? Something powerful? Something dangerous? Something someone else was already working on? Something they desperately needed to keep hidden? Maybe the purification was a happy accident masking a deeper, more unsettling discovery. Did she realize it? Did she hint at it in notes now lost? Did she unknowingly cross a line, trespassing on research someone would kill to protect? This theory makes the impossible vanishing slightly less impossible. If the perpetrators possess technology or understanding far beyond public knowledge, it explains the absolute need for total erasure, not just of her, but of her work, her ideas. It turns her lab from a crime scene into a containment zone. The investigation dragged on, swallowed by the chaos of 2025. Leads dried up. The digital trail was ice cold. The physical scene offered nothing. 40,000 witnesses had seen nothing useful. The case file grew thick with frustration, then thin again as avenues closed. Eventually, inevitably, it joined the pile labeled Unsolved. Active, technically, but going nowhere. Frozen. But the questions hang in that sterile digital air, heavier than the silence after the glitch. Who possessed the capability to make a person vanish in the blink of an eye, live before the world, without a trace? Who needed Elena Torres and her brilliant mind gone so completely that they erased her work from existence? Was it greed for her invention? The cold calculus of corporate power? Was it a personal darkness reaching out with impossible resources? Or was it something else? Did Elena Torres, in her quest to cleanse water, uncover a darkness so profound, so valuable, or so terrifying that it demanded not just her silence, but her utter obliteration from reality? The Phantom of Silicon Beach left no footprints, no fingerprints, no digital crumbs. Only an empty chair, a container of seawater, and a chilling void where genius once stood. And the terrible echoing question: what did she really discover that demanded such absolute silence? Case 2, the Midnight Library, Berlin. Late November, 2025. The city has a pulse, especially at night. Underground clubs pulse with techno. Cozy bars hum with conversation. But that night, something quieter, stranger lured a specific few. An invitation, slipped into the digital world, almost unnoticed. It was billed as the Midnight Library, an immersive labyrinth of forgotten thoughts. A pop-up art experience, the kind of thing that thrives in Berlin's creative undercurrent. Cryptic description: minimalist website, just stark text on a black background, promising a journey into the collective subconscious, curated from fragments of the unspoken. Intriguing enough for the curious. Tickets? Sold exclusively for one single night, November 28th. Pricey but not outrageous. Limited to 12 attendees. First come, first served. Anonymous purchase through encrypted channels. No names required, just a confirmation code. The location was unusual. Not a gallery, not a warehouse repurposed for parties. An old, disused administrative building near the Spree River. Brutalist architecture, concrete, sharp angles, few windows. It had been empty for years. The ground floor entrance, usually barred and dusty, was cleaned. A single sleek, modern touchpad glowed beside the heavy door. No signage, no indication of what lay inside. Just an address and a time, 11:45 p.m. Sharp. They came alone. That was part of the unspoken rule, implied by the ticketing. 12 individuals arriving by taxi, rideshare, or on foot through the chilly November night. No groups, no couples, just 12 solitary figures drawn by curiosity, perhaps a love for the obscure, maybe a search for something different. They didn't know each other. Their paths crossed only at that heavy door, under the dim glow of a distant street lamp. We know who they were, after. The investigation pieced it together. A fascinating, disparate group, Leonie Vogel, 32, a respected archivist for a major museum, specializing in preserving decaying historical documents. Quiet, meticulous. Felix Weber, 45, a disillusioned investigative journalist whose recent exposés on corporate corruption had been mysteriously spiked by his editors. Anya Petrova, 28, a gifted but reclusive programmer known in niche online circles for creating intricate, narrative-driven AI constructs. Rarely left her apartment. David Chun, 60, a retired theoretical physicist whose work on quantum information theory was once groundbreaking, now largely forgotten. Marta Nowak, 38, a former police psychologist who left the force under a cloud of controversy after advocating for radical new approaches to understanding criminal motivation. Jacob Muller, 19, a philosophy student obsessed with existentialist texts and the nature of consciousness, known for late-night, intense online debates. Rashida Hassan, 51, a successful corporate lawyer specializing in intellectual property, representing major tech firms, known for her ruthless efficiency and airtight cases. Ben Carter, 36, a sound engineer for experimental musicians, fascinated by frequencies beyond normal human hearing and their psychological effects. Sophie Dubois, 29, a social media influencer with a large following focused on digital detox and mindfulness, ironically spending hours crafting her supposedly authentic posts. Oleg Volkov, 48, a quiet, unassuming man who worked night security at a high-tech research facility. His background check revealed a brief, obscure stint in military signals intelligence decades prior. Priya Sharma, 25, a linguist working on preserving dying languages, particularly obscure dialects with unique concepts of time and memory. Thomas Klein, 57, a wealthy, reclusive art collector with a known penchant for acquiring disturbing, controversial, and often anonymously sourced pieces. What brought these 12 specific people together? Coincidence? Or was there a hidden thread connecting the archivist, the journalist, the physicist, the lawyer, the sound engineer, the linguist, the collector, the psychologist, the programmer, the student, the influencer, and the security guard? The investigation would desperately search for one, but find only fragments, hints, nothing concrete. Just 12 lives converging on a single dark point. At 11:45 p.m., the door unlocked with a soft click. Each attendee scanned their unique code on the touchpad. The heavy door swung open silently, revealing only darkness within. One by one, they stepped inside. The door closed behind the last one with a solid, final thud. Automatic locks engaged. Secured. Inside, witnesses are absent. Only the 12 ever saw it. Based on the cryptic description and the building's layout, investigators later hypothesized. The entrance foyer was small, bare concrete. A single corridor led deeper. No signs, no instructions. Just a path. It likely led to a single large central chamber, the library. Descriptions from the website hinted at walls lined not with books, but perhaps with shifting projections, whispered audio fragments, tactile surfaces, an environment designed to overwhelm or isolate the senses to evoke forgotten thoughts. The exact nature remains unknown. The only certainty is that it was designed to hold 12 people, and only one way in or out. The door they entered, now locked from the outside, For the next 4 hours, the building sat silent. No sounds escaped. No lights flickered in the few high, slit-like windows. Just a concrete monolith absorbing the night. The city moved on around it. Dawn approached. A cleaner, contracted anonymously and prepaid via untraceable cryptocurrency, arrived at 6 a.m. as per instructions received only the day before. Their job, secure the building after the event. They found the main door unlocked, slightly ajar. That wasn't right. Hesitantly, they pushed it open. The entrance foyer was empty. The corridor beyond? Empty. A profound, unnatural silence hung in the air. Not peaceful. Heavy. Oppressive. The cleaner called out. No answer. Feeling increasingly uneasy, they ventured towards the central chamber, the heart of the library. The large room was cavernous, cold, stripped bare. No art installations, no projections, no tactile surfaces, just vast, empty concrete space. No furniture, no signs of the event that was supposed to have happened there. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, not used mere hours before. But the room wasn't completely empty. In the very center of the bare concrete floor, arranged in a perfect circle, lay 12 smartphones. 12 phones, each one different, belonging to one of the 12 attendees. They weren't scattered. They weren't broken. They were placed deliberately, screen up, positioned with geometric precision, forming a ring about 2 meters in diameter. And every single screen was alive, not displaying a lock screen, not showing an app. Each one was filled with pure, churning gray and white static. The same hissing, empty noise emanated faintly from each device, merging into that unsettling, low drone now filling the room. The sound of nothing, the sound of absence. The cleaner fled, called the police. What followed was an investigation that quickly descended into a chilling void. The scene was clean, too clean. The 12, gone, utterly. No trace, no bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle anywhere in the building. No discarded personal items beyond the phones. It was as if they had never been there. Forensic traces? None. 0 fingerprints on the phones, the door handles, the walls. No footprints on the dusty floors beyond the entrance foyer. No DNA, not a hair, not a skin flake. The central chamber felt vacuum-sealed, sterile. The only biological traces belonged to the cleaner and the first responding officers. The attendees left absolutely nothing of themselves behind. Security cameras? The building had old, disconnected systems. However, investigators quickly discovered signs that new, sophisticated cameras had been temporarily installed, small, high-resolution units, likely hidden. But they were gone, removed, and any footage they might have recorded, wiped, not just deleted. The entire storage system, if it existed locally, was gone. Cloud access? Untraceable. Vanished. The curator? The heart of the mystery. Who organized this? The website registration was a maze of shell companies and encrypted services leading nowhere. The payment for the building's brief use? Untraceable cryptocurrency. The cleaner's contract? Anonymous, digital, paid the same way. The person or entity behind the Midnight Library didn't just use a pseudonym, they were a ghost. They never existed. A fabrication. The building? Meticulously swept. Every inch. Nothing. Old dust undisturbed except in the path from the entrance to the central chamber, likely from the attendees and the cleaner. The central chamber itself? Pristine concrete. No residue. No marks. Except one thing. In the exact center of the circle formed by the 12 static-screened phones, scratched into the concrete floor. Not deeply, but clearly, deliberately. A symbol. It was a simple yet disturbing shape. A circle divided vertically by a single, straight line that extended slightly above and below the circle's circumference, like an eye with a vertical pupil or a simplified planetary symbol bisected. It wasn't machine-cut. It looked like it had been scratched with something hard and sharp, perhaps a piece of stone or metal. It felt crude, ancient, ritualistic. This symbol became the investigation's only tangible lead, and it led down a very dark, very cold path. Forensic analysts scanned it, searched databases. It took weeks, digging through obscure archives, fringe anthropology studies, declassified documents. Finally, a match surfaced. Not in mainstream symbology, but in the records of a small, defunct cult active in rural Germany in the late 1970s and early 80s. They called themselves Die Still Aug, the Silent Eye. Little was known about them. They operated in extreme secrecy. Local police reports mentioned disappearances near their suspected commune, but investigations went nowhere. Witnesses were terrified, uncooperative. The cult itself vanished around 1983. No leaders were ever identified. No doctrine was ever fully uncovered. Rumors swirled. Obsession with silence, with the void, with the concept of erasing the self. Whispers of strange rituals focused on sensory deprivation and collective mental states. Allegations of sacrifices? Not of blood, but of identity, of presence. Their goal, according to fragmented accounts from former members who later recanted or disappeared, was to achieve a state of perfect silence. The dissolution of individual consciousness into an undifferentiated void. Their symbol? The bisected circle. The silent eye, a representation of the void observing itself. The connection was tenuous, decades old. The cult was gone, supposedly. Yet there it was, their symbol, scratched onto the floor of a Berlin warehouse in 2025, at the center of a circle of static, marking the spot where 12 people vanished without a trace. The questions became darker, more unsettling. Why these 12? Was it random? Or was there a hidden logic? Did the curator target specific types of minds? The archivist preserving memory, the physicist probing reality, the psychologist understanding minds, the linguist studying meaning, the collector of the obscure, the programmer creating artificial thought, the sound engineer manipulating perception, the journalist seeking truth, the lawyer defining boundaries, the student questioning existence, the influencer crafting persona, the security guard monitoring boundaries? Were they chosen as representations of different facets of human thought, identity, and perception? Selected for erasure? Why the phones? Why the static? Leaving the phones felt like a signature, a message. The static, the absence of signal, the negation of information, the electronic void. Was it a perverse offering? A symbol of what had been done to the 12? Their voices, their identities, reduced to meaningless noise? Or was it a beacon, a marker of the silence the cult sought? Why leave the symbol? If the perpetrators were meticulous enough to erase all other traces, why leave this one glaring clue? Was it arrogance? A ritualistic requirement? A calling card for those who knew where to look? Or was it a deliberate attempt to point towards the cult? For reasons unknown? Was this dialogue? Had they survived, evolved, operating in the shadows for decades? Had they resurfaced with terrifying new capabilities? Or was it a copycat? Someone using the old symbol, inspired by the cult's unsettling mythology? Or something else entirely, using the symbol as a red herring, a dark joke? What happened in that room? This is the unbearable question. For hours, 12 people, one locked room, no struggle, no sound, then nothing, just static and a symbol. Did they simply dissolve? Were they transported elsewhere? But how? Was it mass hypnosis leading to collective suicide? But where are the bodies? Was it a sophisticated chemical or neurological agent that left no trace and caused complete physical disintegration? A terrifying thought? Or something beyond current understanding? The utter lack of forensic evidence defied all conventional explanations. It felt less like a crime and more like an erasure. The Berlin police, already strained by the wider systemic failures of 2025, were completely out of their depth. The lack of bodies, the lack of evidence, the cult connections stretching into the bizarre. It pushed the case into a realm they couldn't navigate. Federal agencies took over briefly, but the same dead ends awaited them. The anonymous curator remained a ghost. The attendees' fates remained a horrifying blank. The symbol remained an unanswered riddle. The Midnight Library wasn't a place of forgotten thoughts. It became a tomb for 12 minds, 12 lives, vanished into a silence more profound than anyone could imagine. All that remained was a circle of static, a symbol scratched in concrete, and the deafening echo of questions no one could answer. Why them? Why there? Why leave the phones? Why the silent eye? And what terrible, silent ritual unfolded in that empty room between midnight and dawn? The door was locked from the outside, but what locked them in from the inside? And what walked out, carrying 12 souls into the void? Case 3. The Voice from Nowhere, November 3rd, 2025. Just past 2:17 a.m. Night shift at the County Sheriff's Dispatch Center. Routine traffic stops, a domestic disturbance holding pattern, the usual low thrum of nighttime unease. Dispatcher Sarah Evans sipped lukewarm coffee, her eyes scanning the console screens. Then the alert flashed. Incoming 911 call. The caller ID popped up. Not a number, a name that made Sarah's blood run cold. Martin Riggs. Martin Riggs. That name shouldn't be on a caller ID. Not ever again. Martin Riggs died 3 years ago. Car accident. Rolled his pickup on a rain-slicked highway outside town. Pronounced dead at the scene. Sarah knew. Everyone in the small county knew Martin. Knew about the accident. Knew he was buried in Oak Hill Cemetery, Plot 14B. Her finger hovered over the answer button. A glitch? Spoofing? It had to be. But protocol demanded she answer. Heart pounding against her ribs, she hit connect. County 911, what's your emergency? Sarah's voice, trained for calm, held a tremor. The breathing hitched. Then a voice. A male voice. Hoarse. Raw with terror. Gasping between words. Please help, oh God, please. Sir, what is your location? What's happening? Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, alerting nearby units, her eyes locked on the impossible name, Martin Riggs. The voice on the line seemed to fight for air. They're burying them, hurry, please. Burying who, sir? Where are you? Sarah pressed, trying to cut through the panic. A choked sob. Then the words forced out with desperate clarity. They're burying them in the red sand. Sarah flinched. Sir? Sir, are you there? What red sand? Location. Silence for a second. Then pure, unadulterated terror. A scream ripped from the caller's throat. Not a shout. Not a yell. A primal, soul-shattering scream of absolute, unimaginable horror. It filled Sarah's headset, raw and agonizing. It wasn't acting. It wasn't a prank. It was the sound of someone facing something unspeakable. Sir? Sir? Sarah yelled into the void. Nothing. She checked the connection. The call was still active according to the system, but no sound. No breathing. Just dead silence. The caller ID still blared, Martin Riggs. Units were already rolling, lights and sirens cutting through the sleepy town, heading towards the last known cell tower ping for Martin Riggs' phone, a location that made no sense. Not near his old home, not near the cemetery, pinging from a desolate stretch of scrubland and desert known locally as the Red Sands. Named for its distinctive rust-colored dirt, deputies arrived at the coordinates derived from the cell tower ping. The Red Sands, barren, moonlit, nothing but scrub, rocks, and that pervasive red dirt. No car, no sign of anyone. They searched the immediate area, flashlights cutting beams through the darkness. Frustration mounted. A sick joke? A cruel hoax exploiting a dead man's name? Then Deputy Miller's boot scuffed something. Not rock, something softer. He shone his light down, freshly turned earth. A patch of disturbed red sand, roughly rectangular, maybe 6 feet by 10 feet. Too neat to be an animal. Too fresh. And beside it, half buried in the loose dirt, a cell phone. An older model. Dusty but intact. He picked it up carefully. The screen was cracked but lit up briefly as he moved it. Enough to see the background photo. A faded picture of Martin Riggs, grinning beside his old pickup truck. Confirmation. This was Martin Riggs' phone. The phone that had been buried with him 3 years ago. Or should have been. A chill colder than the desert night gripped the deputies. They looked at the rectangle of disturbed earth. They're burying them in the red sand. The dispatcher's relayed words echoed. With grim, dawning horror, they started digging. It didn't take long. About 3 feet down, the shovels hit something solid. Not rock. Wood. They cleared more dirt, their flashlight beams converging. Not one coffin. Multiple. Crude, makeshift boxes like rough pine crates haphazardly stacked within the pit. 5 of them. With a sense of profound dread, they pried open the first crate. The smell hit them first, not the overwhelming decay they expected, but a dry, dusty, oddly chemical scent. Inside a body, desiccated, mummified by the dry desert air, dressed in clothes that looked several years out of date. Not Martin Riggs. A stranger. They opened the others. For more bodies. Same condition. Preserved, but clearly dead for a significant time. All strangers. 5 bodies in crude boxes, buried shallowly in the red sand. Just as the voice on the dead man's phone had said, the scene exploded. Forensics, detectives, medical examiners. The small county was overwhelmed. The bodies were carefully transported to the state lab. Identification was the first priority. Fingerprints, dental records, DNA analysis. The process, hampered by 2025's systemic issues, still yielded grim results. The 5 victims weren't. Missing persons from the local area. They weren't even from the same state. Cross-referencing databases revealed a chilling connection. All 5 had been reported missing in late 2023. From different cities, different backgrounds. No apparent links between them. just vanished. Until now, buried together in the desert 2 years later. Cause of death was difficult to determine due to the advanced desiccation, but initial findings pointed to violence. Blunt force trauma, ligature marks, signs of struggle before death. This was a mass grave, a dumping ground for victims killed years earlier. Then came the twist, the detail that turned a horrifying cold case into an impossible nightmare. The forensic team meticulously examined the bodies. Standard procedure includes swabbing under fingernails, searching for trace evidence, skin cells, hair, fibers, anything the victim might have grabbed or scratched from their attacker in their final moments. The results came back, and they made no sense. On every single victim, on all 5 bodies, trapped under fingernails preserved by the dry conditions, they found DNA. Not just any DNA. The DNA profile matched one person, Martin Riggs. Martin Riggs, dead for 3 years. Martin Riggs, whose phone was found beside the grave. Martin Riggs, whose voice, impossibly, had begged for help just hours before the grave was discovered. His DNA was found under the fingernails of 5 people who had been killed in 2023, a year before Martin Riggs himself died. The implications were staggering, nonsensical. The call. How did a call originate from Martin Riggs' phone buried, or so they thought, for 3 years? Who was the voice? It sounded terrified, real. Was it Riggs? A ghost? A recording? An impossibly good mimic? And how was the phone at the grave site, physically present? The grave. Who buried these 5 victims here years after their deaths? Why bury them now, in 2025? Why in this specific desolate spot? Why the crude boxes? And crucially, how did they get Martin Riggs' phone? The DNA. This was the impossible core. How did Martin Riggs' DNA get under the fingernails of 5 people killed before he died? Did he kill them? But he had no connection to them, no history of violence, and solid alibis for the times they vanished, verified post-mortem by desperate investigators. Did he somehow encounter them after they were dead? Absurd. Was his DNA planted? But how? DNA degrades. Planting viable, identifiable DNA from a dead man years later, under the nails of mummified corpses, without leaving other traces, seemed beyond even sophisticated forensic tampering. And why plant it? To frame a dead man? To create this exact scenario of impossible horror? Riggs' body. The immediate, horrifying question. Was Martin Riggs really in his coffin? With the county in an uproar, they got an emergency court order to exhume his grave at Oak Hill Cemetery. The coffin was dug up, opened, and inside was Martin Riggs. Decomposed, but identifiable by dental records and the unique surgical pins from injuries sustained in his fatal crash. He had been buried there. His phone, however, was not with him. It should have been, according to funeral records, a common practice. But it wasn't. Someone had removed it before burial. Or, had it ever been there? The investigation spiraled into madness. The phone. Forensic analysis of the phone found at the grave yielded nothing. Wiped clean. Not just factory reset, professionally scrubbed. The call log showed only the 911 call. The SIM card was a dead end. The phone itself, while Riggs, was just an empty shell holding an impossible call. The voice analysis on the 911 recording was inconclusive. The terror distorted it. Experts couldn't definitively say it was or wasn't Martin Riggs. It sounded like him, according to his family who heard the recording in agony, but stress changes voices. Could it be a mimic? A recording manipulated? Maybe. But the timing, the live interaction with Sarah Evans, argued against a simple recording. The victims, the 5 victims, remained enigmas. No connections to each other. No connections to Martin Riggs. No connections to the Red Sands area. Why were they chosen? Why kill them in 2023 only to bury them dramatically in 2025? The perpetrators, who staged this? Who had the resources to remove Riggs' phone years earlier or intercept it before burial? Preserve or acquire his DNA, potentially mimic his voice or coerce him somehow. But he was dead. Kill 5 unrelated people years prior, store the bodies, transport them to the desert, dig the grave, plant the phone, make the impossible call at the exact right moment to be traced, and vanish without a trace. The level of planning, the timeline spanning years, the deliberate creation of an impossible scenario, it felt like the work of a ghost. Or something far more calculating. Motive, why? What was the point? To terrify? To send a message? To expose the mass grave? But why? Involve Riggs so impossibly? Was it a sick ritual? An experiment? A demonstration of power? A warning? The message, if there was one, was indecipherable chaos. Theories crumbled under the weight of the contradictions. Hoax? Too elaborate, too expensive, requiring access to Riggs' body/DNA/phone years in advance and 5 actual murder victims. The terror in the voice felt too real. Corrupt officials? Why create such a bizarre, attention-grabbing scenario? It pointed a massive spotlight on the grave. Supernatural? The DNA evidence and the timing defied logic, pushing minds towards the unexplainable. A ghost? A temporal paradox? But the physical grave, the stolen phone, the staged call. It felt like a meticulously planned human act exploiting something unknown. Riggs involved? His DNA placed him impossibly at the 2023 crimes. But he was dead. His body was in its grave. His alibis held. He had no motive, no connection. The case became a black hole. Local authorities were paralyzed. State and federal agencies took over, but the same impossible questions remained. The victims' families had gruesome closure, but no answers. Martin Riggs' family was re-traumatized, haunted by the voice and the horrific implication he might have been involved in something monstrous before his death. The perpetrator or perpetrators vanished like smoke. The voice from nowhere left only impossible evidence. A call from a dead man's phone, leading to a grave of older victims, all marked with the dead man's DNA from a time before he died. A closed loop of horror with no entry point, no exit, and no explanation. Who staged the call? How did Riggs' DNA get under those nails? And what terrifying message was sent by burying the past with the impossible voice of the dead crying out from the red sand? The desert holds its secrets, and the voice only screamed one thing. The terrifying truth that some doors, once opened, lead only to darkness and questions that shred the fabric of the possible. Case 4. The children who knew too much. A small town nestled deep in the Norwegian fjords. Not postcard perfect, but real. Wooden houses, painted cheerful colors clinging to steep slopes. Crisp, clean air smelling of pine and salt water. A tight-knit community where everyone knows everyone, and life moves at the rhythm of the seasons and the tides. Safe, quiet, predictable. Until December 2025. It started subtly at Fjellheim Primary School. 8 children, all between 7 and 9 years old. Different classes, different friend groups, different families. No obvious link. Over the course of a week, their teachers noticed something odd. During free drawing time, in notebooks, on scrap paper, even absent-mindedly in the margins of their math work, they were all drawing the same symbol. It wasn't a sun, a heart, or a star. It was geometric, precise, unusual for children their age. Imagine a circle. Inside the circle, 3 interlocking triangles pointing inward, forming a complex, almost star-like pattern with sharp, converging points at the center. It looked intricate, deliberate, and every single one of these 8 children drew it, repeatedly, with an unusual focus. Teachers gently asked about it. The answers were vague, unsettling. It just came into my head. I saw it in a dream. It felt important to draw. Some children seemed slightly withdrawn during this week, others perfectly normal, except for this shared compulsion to sketch this strange, complex shape. The teachers shared notes. Mild concern, but nothing alarming. Kids pick up things. Maybe a new cartoon symbol? An online game? They decided to monitor it. They took photos of the drawings, planning to show parents during upcoming meetings. The symbol itself was logged in the school records as a curious anomaly. Life in Fjellheim continued. Then came the morning of December 12th. Parents woke their children. Breakfast was made. Lunches packed. Normal routines. But when parents spoke to their children, nothing. No sleepy morning. No complaints about oatmeal. No chatter about the day ahead. The children looked at their parents. Eyes wide. Aware. Present. But their mouths remained closed. Lips sealed. Not defiantly. Not fearfully. Just blank. Expressionless. Silent. Panic rippled through 8 households. Frantic questions. What's wrong? Does something hurt? Can you say anything? The children reacted. They nodded. They shook their heads. They pointed. They understood language perfectly. They could follow complex instructions. They could mime. They could even write simple words or names. But speech? Gone. Utterly. Not a whisper. Not a sound. The ability to form words, to make vocalizations beyond basic cries or whimpers of frustration, had vanished. Overnight, the school became the epicenter of chaos. 8 silent children arrived, wide-eyed, confused by the fear around them, perhaps, but seemingly calm within their own silent world. The teachers were horrified. The headmaster called an emergency. Doctors were summoned. Police notified. By noon, the entire town of Jelheim was holding its breath, a cold dread seeping into the picturesque streets. The initial assumption was profound psychological trauma. Had something happened? A shared event? Abuse? A horrific secret? Child psychologists and trauma specialists descended on the small town. They interviewed the children gently, using drawings, toys, writing. The children cooperated. They seemed fine. No signs of fear. No avoidance. They drew pictures of happy families playing outside their homes. They wrote their names. They nodded yes or no. They communicated their basic needs. But about the event itself? About why they couldn't speak? They drew blanks. Literally. They shrugged. Looked confused. Wrote, don't know. Can't. One child drew a large question mark over their own head. There were no shared nightmares reported before the event. No reports of bullying or a scary incident at school. No common location visited outside school hours. The homes were stable, loving environments. Psychological trauma seemed less and less likely. The silence felt less like a protective barrier and more like an absence. A missing function. Medical examinations began. Physical checkups first. No injuries. No signs of illness, infection, or poisoning. Throats were clear. Vocal cords appeared normal. Hearing tests were perfect. Basic neurological screenings showed nothing obvious. The mystery deepened. Then came the advanced scans. MRI. Functional MRI. PET scans. The images were sent to neurology specialists in Oslo, then internationally. The results weren't just shocking, they were terrifying. The children's brains showed clear, physical alterations. Not damage from a stroke or injury. Not the swelling of infection. This was different. This was rewiring. Language centers, Broca's area and Wernicke's area. The brain regions crucial for producing and understanding speech showed significantly reduced. Activity, not dormant but suppressed. Like circuits had been deliberately dialed down. Neural pathways, the intricate white matter pathways connecting these language centers to other parts of the brain. The motor cortex for controlling mouth and tongue, the auditory cortex for processing sound feedback, showed subtle but distinct changes. Pathways that should have been strong highways appeared thinned, rerouted, or partially disconnected. It wasn't destruction, it was reorganization. Like someone had taken a schematic of the brain's communication network and deliberately rerouted the cables for speech. Neuroplasticity gone wrong. The brain's amazing ability to rewire itself, neuroplasticity, usually happens slowly through learning, recovery, or adaptation. This looked like targeted, accelerated, and maladaptive plasticity, as if a specific set of connections had been forcibly pruned and others reinforced overnight, effectively isolating the speech function. It was biological sabotage on a microscopic level. This wasn't psychological. This was physical, structural. Something had physically changed the architecture of these children's brains, specifically targeting their ability to speak. Overnight, the hunt for a cause became frantic and global. Toxins, extensive environmental testing in Jelheim, air, water, soil, food from the school cafeteria, the children's homes. Nothing. No known neurotoxins. No heavy metals. No unusual chemicals. The town was pristine. Viruses/pathogens? Blood tests, spinal taps, exhaustive screening for every known infectious agent, rare parasites, even prion diseases. All negative. No signs of inflammation typical of infection. The children were physically healthy except for the neurological changes. Genetic? Sequencing revealed no shared mutations or known disorders affecting speech. The children weren't related. This wasn't inherited. Environmental factors? Electromagnetic fields? Power lines? Local infrastructure? All within normal, safe limits. No unusual solar activity. No construction projects. Jelheim was unchanged. The medical community was baffled. How do you rewire 8 specific brains in one night, in one small town, without leaving a single physical trace of how you did it? It defied every known mechanism of neurology, toxicology, and medicine. It felt less like disease and more like precision engineering. Then, amidst the medical dead ends, a digital detective made a connection. One of the investigators, poring over every scrap of information, looked back at the symbol, the intricate circle with 3 inward-pointing triangles. He'd seen it before. Not in a medical journal. Not in folklore. Online, in the darker corners of the net. A quick search confirmed it. It was the logo, the unmistakable calling card of a shadowy hacker collective known only as Cicada 9. Cicada 9 wasn't your typical cybercrime group. They were ideological, enigmatic, known for complex, symbolic hacks targeting government agencies, major corporations, and research institutions. They rarely stole money. They stole secrets, and they published them, dramatically, often accompanied by cryptic manifestos about freedom of information, the dangers of unchecked power, and the corruption hidden behind closed doors. Their signature was the intricate symbol the children had drawn. They always left it embedded somewhere in their code or displayed on the screens of their victims. Cicada 9 had been active, sporadically, for about 5 years. Their hacks were sophisticated, frustratingly difficult to trace. Then, in late October 2025, just weeks before the children in Fjellheim started drawing the symbol, Cicada 9 pulled off their most audacious hack yet. They breached the heavily fortified servers of Nordic Advanced Neurocybernetics, a cutting-edge, privately funded research institute based in Sweden. NANC was notoriously secretive, working on government and corporate contracts rumored to involve brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, advanced neural mapping, and cognitive enhancement. Cicada 9 didn't just steal data, they unleashed it. They dumped terabytes of internal documents, research notes, emails, and project files onto the open web. The leak caused an uproar. Scandals erupted, questionable ethics in experiments, covert military funding. But one project buried deep within the leaked files drew the investigators' chilling attention: Project Blank Slate. The files were heavily redacted, even by Cicada 9, but the fragments were horrifying. Project Blank Slate wasn't about enhancement. It was about erasure, suppression. The research notes hinted at non-invasive techniques, using precisely tuned electromagnetic fields or targeted ultrasonic pulses to induce controlled, temporary neural plasticity. The goal: to temporarily disrupt specific neural pathways, to silence dissenters by literally making them unable to articulate dissent, to erase inconvenient memories not by deleting them, but by blocking access to the neural circuits needed to recall them, to create a blank slate, not of the mind, but of specific functions or memories. The research was theoretical, marked as highly experimental, ethically prohibited, and, crucially, it referenced the potential for long-range directional delivery systems. Like a focused beam, the leaked documents mentioned animal trials with promising but unstable results, and chillingly theoretical models for human application. Vehemently denied Project Blank Slate was anything beyond speculative brainstorming. But the symbol was there, embedded in a diagram within the leaked blank slate files. The Cicada 9 symbol, the children's symbol. Then silence. Immediately after the leak, Cicada 9 vanished. Their communication channels went dark. No new hacks, no manifestos, no taunts. They ghosted the digital world completely. Just as the children started drawing their symbol, the connection was too stark, too chilling to ignore. The symbol. The children drew the Cicada 9 logo, a symbol embedded in the leaked Project Blank Slate files, weeks after the hack and before losing their speech. The method, Project Blank Slate, described precisely the kind of effect witnessed: targeted neural rewiring to suppress specific functions, speech, without physical damage, using non-invasive energy fields. The target: why children? Perhaps their developing brains were more susceptible to such manipulation? Easier to rewire? Or was it a horrific demonstration? Proof of concept? The silence, Cicada 9 vanished. Were they caught? Eliminated? Or had they succeeded in their ultimate hack? Exposing a terrifying technology by demonstrating its effects in the most horrifying way possible? Was Fjellheim their final message? A living, breathing testament to the existence of Project Blank Slate? The questions were agonizing. Was it an attack? Did, or the shadowy backers of Project Blank Slate, deploy their experimental technology against the children to silence Cicada 9's ultimate whistleblowers? Did they somehow link the children to the hackers, though no connection was ever found? Was Fjellheim a horrific retaliation? A warning to others? Was it Cicada 9? Did the hackers themselves activate Project Blank Slate technology, perhaps stolen or reverse-engineered, using the children as unwilling test subjects to prove the technology's existence and horrifying potential? Was the symbol drawing a side effect? A marker? Was their sudden silence because they achieved their goal, exposing the monster at an unbearable cost? An unforeseen consequence? Was the symbol itself some kind of trigger? A resonant frequency embedded visually or conceptually that accidentally activated dormant, experimental tech nearby? Was Fjellheim near a hidden test site? Surveys found nothing. Was it a terrible accident? How? How was it done? What was the delivery mechanism? A hidden device in the town? A satellite? An undetectable energy beam? The complete lack of physical evidence pointed to something frighteningly sophisticated and untraceable. The Norwegian government launched a massive, classified investigation. Was raided, its leadership questioned. No evidence linked them directly to Fjellheim. No hidden devices were found in the town. No unusual energy signatures were detected, though investigators worried they might not know what to look for. Cicada 9 remained ghosts. The children? They didn't recover. Months passed. Years. Intensive speech therapy, neurological rehabilitation, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. The rewiring held. They learned sign language. They used tablets to communicate. They adapted, as children do, with heartbreaking resilience. But their voices were gone, not stolen by trauma, but erased by something that physically altered the landscape of their minds. They understood everything, but the bridge between thought and spoken word had been severed at its root. The school where memories vanished didn't lose memories, it lost futures. It lost voices. The 8 children of Fjellheim became living symbols of a terrifying possibility: that the most intimate space, our own minds, might not be safe. That knowledge itself could be dangerous enough to invite silencing not through threats or violence, but through the cold, precise severing of the ability to speak it. Were they victims of a weapon they didn't know existed? Pawns in a war between hackers and shadowy corporations? Or an accidental casualty of technology leaping too far ahead of ethics? The symbol remains. The silence remains. And the chilling question hangs over the fjords. If they can take the children's voices without a trace, what else can they take? And who is next? Project Blank Slate wasn't just a name. It was a promise of a terrifying future, written not in code, but in the silent eyes of 8 children who drew the wrong symbol and knew too much. The pattern weave walked through the darkness. Elena Torres vanished midstream. 12 souls erased in Berlin. Martin Riggs' voice crying from beyond the grave. The silent children of Fjellheim. For nightmares. For seemingly isolated tragedies scattered across the globe in that fractured year, 2025. Different faces. Different places. Different horrors. But look closer. Peel back the layers of the impossible, and a chilling pattern emerges. A common thread woven not from coincidence, but from the very fabric of the time itself. It wasn't just that these crimes happened. It was how they vanished. How they left nothing behind but questions that curdle in the silence. And the key to that vanishing act, it was hiding in plain sight. In the tools we built. In the systems we trusted. In the gleaming digital world we thought made us safer, smarter, more connected. The flaw wasn't in the darkness. The flaw was in the light we used to try and see it. Think about each case. Really think. What did they all share? What was the eerie echo bouncing between them? Elena Torres. Her lab wasn't just tidy. It was forensically sterile. No fingerprints? Understandable if wiped. But none. Not a single smudge? That's not clean. That's manufactured clean. Her digital life? Notes, research, cloud storage. Not deleted, but encrypted beyond recovery. Overwritten into digital dust with military-grade algorithms. That's not hiding. That's total digital annihilation. It wasn't just thorough. It was too thorough. Too perfect. Like a magic trick where the rabbit doesn't just disappear. The entire hat and the magician's gloves vanished too, leaving only the empty stage. The Midnight Library, 12 people. One room. Locked door. No bodies. No blood. No hair. No skin cells. Not a single biological trace left behind in that vast concrete space. That level of absence isn't natural. It's engineered absence. And the security cameras? New ones installed, then removed, their footage wiped clean. Not just turned off. Not just unplugged. Erased so completely it was as if they never existed. Again, not just hidden. Scrubbed from reality. Too clean. Too absolute. The voice from nowhere. A 911 call from a dead man's phone. Impossible. Yet it happened. The phone itself? Found beside a mass grave, professionally scrubbed. Cleaner than a factory reset. Only the 911 call log remained, like a single mocking breadcrumb. The DNA evidence? Martin Riggs' profile under the nails of victims killed before he died. Planting DNA is hard. planting specific, identifiable DNA from a deceased person onto mummified corpses years after the fact, without leaving a single trace of the planting process itself? That's not just clever, it's impossibly precise. It felt less like evidence and more like a stage prop placed with cold, calculated perfection. Too impossible. Too neat. The children of Fjellheim, 8 minds rewired overnight. Speech physically severed at the neurological root. No toxins, no viruses, no physical trauma, just silence etched into their biology. And the cause? Untraceable. No energy signature. No hidden device. No residue. The effect was devastatingly real, horrifyingly physical. But the method? A ghost. A digital specter. The weapon left no ballistic fingerprint, no chemical signature, no sound wave pattern. It was the perfect crime against the mind, precisely because it left nothing for forensics to find. Not messy, not chaotic. Surgical. Do you see it now? The pattern screaming from the void. In every single case, technology didn't just fail to capture the truth. It was used to obliterate it. And not clumsily. Not with the messy fingerprints of panic, but with a chilling, sterile perfection. The evidence wasn't missing. It was too clean, too wiped, too impossible. It wasn't the absence of clues. It was the presence of an unnatural, digital void where clues should have been. This was the trap of 2025. We had built a world of code. We trusted it. We believed in its infallibility. Fingerprint databases would catch the guilty. DNA would be the ultimate identifier. Surveillance cameras were the unblinking eyes. Digital records were the perfect memory. Encrypted data was safe. We believed a clean digital trail meant innocence, and a corrupted one meant, well, just corruption, something fixable. We trusted the binary logic of machines more than the messy intuition of humans. We believed technology was the ultimate detective, the perfect witness, the incorruptible judge. But what if someone weaponized that very trust? What if the monsters didn't fight the system? What if they understood it? What if they knew its weaknesses, its blind spots, its arrogance, better than the people who built and maintained it? What if they knew exactly how it would fail? They knew police databases could be drowned in cyber attacks, turning investigations into digital trench warfare. They knew forensic labs were drowning in backlogs and budget cuts, that evidence could degrade, get lost, or simply take too long to process, letting trails go cold. They knew media attention was a flickering candle, easily blown out by the next algorithmic gust of wind. They knew courts were labyrinths where complex, weird cases could get lost for years. They knew that a perfectly wiped drive looked like an accident or negligence, not a deliberate act of erasure. They knew that an impossible piece of evidence, like a dead man's DNA in the wrong place, could paralyze logic, creating confusion that was the perfect smokescreen. They knew that creating an absence of evidence, especially a digitally perfect absence, could be far more effective than leaving misleading clues. These weren't crimes of passion. These weren't messy acts of rage or desperation leaving blood spatter and screaming witnesses. These were surgical strikes, executed with terrifying precision, targeting not just the victims, but the very systems designed to find justice for them. Elena's vanishing wasn't just about silencing her. It was about demonstrating the ease with which a life and its work could be digitally vaporized, leaving investigators staring at a sterile void. The Berlin disappearances weren't just about taking 12 people. It was about showcasing the power to erase human presence completely, mocking the idea that surveillance or forensics could ever capture the truth. The voice from nowhere wasn't just about exposing a grave. It was about weaponizing impossibility itself, using technology to create a logical paradox that short-circuited investigation. The silencing of the Fjellheim children wasn't just about stopping speech. It was about proving the invisibility of a new kind of weapon, one that left no trace because it exploited the system's inability to even perceive its method. The culprits? They weren't just criminals. They were system hackers, architects of silence. They operated in the cracks between our systems. The gap between digital and physical forensics, the lag between a crime and an overwhelmed lab, the fleeting moment of media attention. They exploited the human flaws baked into our technological reliance. Our complacency, our distraction, our blind faith in the machine, our resource shortages, our bureaucratic inertia. They knew that in 2025, creating the perfect digital ghost was more effective than any alibi. They knew that making evidence too clean, too wiped, too impossible wouldn't just baffle the system. It would paralyze it. It would make the crime seem less like a human act and more like a glitch in the matrix, something beyond comprehension, something unsolvable. This is the dark truth binding these cases together. The monsters of 2025 didn't lurk in the shadows. They walked in the blinding light of our own technology. They wore the mask of the digital void. They spoke the language of corrupted files and encrypted silence. They moved with the cold efficiency of a perfectly executed algorithm designed for one purpose. Not just to kill or kidnap or silence, but to vanish. To leave behind not clues, but a chilling testament to the fragility of our systems and the terrifying potential of those who learn to make the digital world their accomplice in perfect crime. The phantom, the silent eye, the voice, the blank slate, they weren't just perpetrators. They were symptoms. Symptoms of a year when the tools we built to illuminate the darkness became the very things that cast the deepest, most impenetrable shadows. We trusted the code, and in that trust, we built the perfect hiding place. The question that haunts the silence isn't just, who did this? It's far more unsettling. What else is hiding in the clean, digital void we created, and when will it strike next? The pattern isn't just a clue. It's a warning etched in static and silence. The darkest question, who benefits? We've seen the monsters. We've seen the methods, the vanishings, the silences, the impossible evidence. But monsters don't act for nothing. Darkness serves a purpose. Always. So let's ask the question that chokes in the throat of every investigation, the one that gets buried under forensics reports and dead ends. Who wins? Follow the silence. Not the screams, not the static, not the empty chairs. Follow where the silence leads. Follow the money. Follow the power. Because in 2025, Unsolved isn't a failure of justice. It's a business model. It's a strategy. And it pays very well. Start with Elena Torres. Her invention wasn't just clever. It was revolutionary. Ocean water turned clean and drinkable. Cheap. Scalable. Think what that does. It threatens billion-dollar desalination plants. It drowns the profits of water utilities that control scarcity. It undermines governments that use water as a political weapon. Her patents? Filed but not finalized. After she vanished, those patents didn't just stall. They moved. Tracing them was like chasing smoke. Shell companies nested inside shell companies. Offshore registries in places where laws are written in whispers. Legal paperwork signed by entities that dissolved the day after they were created. The patents for Project Clearwell? They resurfaced 18 months later, owned by a consortium linked to existing water infrastructure giants. The very ones whose profits would have evaporated if Elena's backpack-sized miracle hit the market. Coincidence? Or was her vanishing act the most profitable acquisition in corporate history? Clean water for millions silenced, so the old pipes could keep leaking cash. Now Berlin. 12 people. Erased. The Midnight Library. Tickets bought with untraceable cryptocurrency. Funds routed through mixing services that scrambled digital footprints like confetti in a hurricane. The money paid for the venue? The temporary cameras? The anonymous cleaner? It flowed in, did its job, and vanished. Perfectly. But who pays for such a thing? Who spends that kind of money to make 12 people disappear without a trace? Not a grieving spouse. Not a jealous rival. This was an investment. Think about who was in that room. The journalist digging into buried corruption. The psychologist who understood how power breaks minds. The physicist playing with realities. The lawyer who built walls around corporate secrets. The linguist preserving truths that powerful people wanted forgotten. Each one was a loose end, a potential whistleblower, a thinker who saw patterns others missed. Someone somewhere looked at that list and saw a liability, and they paid top dollar, anonymously, perfectly, for a service that delivered more than death. It delivered erasure. No bodies, no funerals, no lingering questions, just static and a symbol. Silence purchased with digital gold. Then the desert. Martin Riggs' voice from the grave. The mass grave on land soaked in red sand. The investigation focused on the how, the impossible call, the baffling DNA. But follow the land. That patch of desert wasn't empty real estate. It sat right in the middle of a proposed development zone. High-speed rail, industrial parks, a project worth billions, championed by a state senator with deep pockets and deeper connections. The deal was stalled. Environmental concerns, tribal land claims. Then 2 weeks after the 911 call led police to dig up those 5 bodies, the obstacles vanished. The environmental report got updated. The tribal council suddenly reached a mutually beneficial agreement. The project got fast-tracked. The senator's approval ratings soared. And the company building the rail line? Major donors to his campaign. Those bodies buried in the red sand? They were a problem solved twice over. First, they were killed in 2023. Then in 2025, their rediscovery became the perfect smokescreen, a horrifying spectacle that drowned out the whispers about backroom deals and pressured approvals. A dead man's scream, masking the sound of money changing hands. Finally, Fjelheim, the silent children, the symbol, the hacker leak about Project Blank Slate. The town itself, picturesque, remote, and sitting right on top of one of the largest untapped deposits of rare earth minerals in Europe. Minerals vital for everything from smartphones to weapons systems. Mining it would mean tearing up the fjords, destroying the community, sparking huge protests. The children started drawing the hacker symbol after Cicada 9 exposed Project Blank Slate. Then they were silenced. Not killed, silenced, made into living symbols of a technology too dangerous to exist. The hacker group vanished. The neurotech company NENC was raided, its reputation shattered. The focus shifted entirely to the horror of the children's condition and the terrifying potential of mind-altering weapons. And the mining rights? They quietly changed hands 6 months later. Sold for pennies on, the dollar to a subsidiary of a global resource conglomerate. No protests, no outcry. The town was broken, grieving, focused on caring for their silent children. The path was clear. The rare earth minerals? Ready for extraction. The silence of 8 children paved the way for the roar of bulldozers. See the pattern now. Elena's tech? Patents swallowed by the old guard. Berlin's vanished? Liabilities permanently removed, paid for in ghost money. The desert graves? A land deal unlocked by a macabre distraction. Fjelheim's children? A roadblock to resources eliminated by manufactured terror. This isn't conspiracy. This is capitalism of chaos. This is power laundering. The monsters who pulled the triggers, who activated the tech, who made the calls, they were contractors. Hired hands, specialists in creating silence. The real culprits? They sit in corner offices. They walk the halls of government. They sign the deals. They own the mines. They control the water. They don't get their hands dirty. They pay others to create the void. And how do they ensure the void stays empty? How do they keep these cases unsolved? They exploit the system's rot. Police, underfunded labs, overworked detectives. A well-placed donation to a city councilman's re-election campaign ensures those labs stay underfunded. A whispered suggestion to shift resources to more solvable crimes. Media, a friendly media mogul kills a damaging story. An algorithm is tweaked to push viral fluff instead of unsettling mysteries. Silence is bought with ad revenue and access. Courts, judges facing budget constraints delay complex cases indefinitely. Key witnesses receive sudden, generous job offers overseas. Evidence gets misfiled by clerks whose mortgages get mysteriously paid off. Politicians, they don't order cover-ups. They simply stop asking questions. They defund task forces. They praise police for focusing on real threats. They turn the unsolved into the unmentionable. Justice in 2025 isn't blind. It's bankrupt. It's been purchased piece by piece by those who profit most from the silence. The perfect crime isn't the one with no clues. It's the one where everyone capable of following the clues has been paid to look away. So who benefits? Follow the silence. It leads to boardrooms where Elena's invention is shelved to protect profit margins. It leads to shadowy forums where disappearances are auctioned to the highest bidder. It leads to desert ground broken for construction, paid for with blood and a dead man's scream. It leads to mining corporations counting their gains while 8 children learn sign language because their voices were the price of progress. The darkest truth isn't that monsters exist. It's that they're hired. And the receipts? They're written in silence, paid for in power, and filed away where no one will ever see them. The void isn't just where the victims vanished. It's where the truth goes to die. Because in 2025, silence isn't empty. It's profitable, and someone is getting very, very rich. Final words, the truth isn't lost. It's hidden. We've walked through the darkness of 2025. Vanished genius, erased souls, voices from the grave, silent children. We've seen the impossible evidence. Too clean, too wiped, too precise. We've followed the silence straight to the doors of power and profit, to the boardrooms and back rooms where silence isn't a failure. It's the product. It's the point. Let's be brutally clear. These cases, Elena Torres, the Berlin 12, Martin Riggs and the Desert Graves, The children of Fjelheim. They aren't cold cases. Cold implies nature took its course. Time buried the clues. Chance hid the truth. No, these cases are frozen. Deliberately. Systematically. Frozen solid by design. The ice isn't time, it's money. It's influence. It's the calculated application of power to stop the thaw. To keep the truth locked away. Someone knows. Right now. As you listen to this silence, someone breathes air Elena Torres should be breathing. Someone knows exactly where she is. Or what's left. They know the room she vanished from, the chair she sat in, the sound of her voice before the glitch. They know the method. They know the price paid to make her, and her world-changing water disappear. That knowledge sits inside them. A fact. Like the weather. Like the time. Someone watched the feeds from Berlin. Someone monitored the 12 as they stepped into the trap. Someone saw the empty room when the lights came on. Someone placed those phones in that perfect circle, static screaming into the void. Someone heard the silence settle and felt satisfaction. Achievement. Maybe even amusement. They know why those 12. They know who paid for their erasure. They know what secret died with them. That knowledge is their currency. Their dark trophy. Someone programmed the call. Someone planted Martin Riggs' DNA on those long-dead hands. Someone stood in the desert night, maybe watched from a distance as the deputies dug. They heard the screams over the line, real or manufactured, and knew it was working. They know who those victims were in 2023. They know why they were killed then, and why they were buried now. They know who owns the red sand now, and how much it's worth. They carry that ledger in their head. Someone triggered the silence in Fjelheim. Someone aimed the weapon, physical or digital, that rewired 8 young brains. They know the frequency, the wavelength, the hidden device or the unseen beam. They know where Project Blank Slate's blueprints are now. They know who profits from the rare earth under the silent town. They know the cost of those lost voices, measured not in grief, but in stock prices and mineral yields. And someone powerful, someone whose name doesn't appear in any file, whose face isn't on any camera, whose signature is written in shadows and offshore accounts. This someone listens. They listen when the news calls 2025 a mystery. They listen when politicians shrug and say, some cases just aren't meant to be solved. They listen when the public sighs, overwhelmed, and clicks to the next distraction. They listen to the silence they paid for, and they hear victory. The darkest truth? They are counting on you. Right now. They are betting on this moment. The moment you switch this off. The moment you shake your head, unsettled, maybe even angry, but then move on. They are counting on the fatigue. The feeling that it's too big, too complex, too dark to fight. They are counting on the silence becoming comfortable. Normal. They are counting on you to stop looking, to stop asking, to stop demanding answers. Because the void only works if we agree to live in it. The freeze only holds if we stop trying to break the ice. Don't let the static be the last sound. Don't let the silence win. Don't grant them the comfort of your forgetting. Share this. Not just the chills, the mystery. Share the pattern. Share the corruption. Share the names Elena Torres, the Berlin 12, Martin Riggs, the Fjelheim children. Say them. Make others hear them. Talk about the water patents that vanished. Talk about the crypto that paid for erasure. Talk about the desert land deals and the rare earth under silent towns. Talk about the systems that failed because someone wanted them to fail. Talk about it in kitchens, on buses, in comment sections carefully, over coffee, in the dark when the world feels too quiet. Break the silence they sold. Break the freeze they engineered. Because the only thing scarier than these stories, the only thing more terrifying than Elena vanishing, the Berlin 12 erased, Martin Riggs' impossible cry, the children's stolen voices, letting them stay untold, letting the silence they bought become permanent, letting 2025 fade into just another mysterious year, letting the monsters walk away, counting their money in the quiet dark. The truth isn't lost. It's hidden, buried under money, frozen by power. But it's there, and it waits. Not for heroes, not for governments. It waits for noise, for the relentless, inconvenient, irritating, unignorable noise of people who refuse to shut up, who refuse to stop asking, who benefits. Where is Elena? What happened in Berlin? How was Riggs' DNA planted? Who silenced the children? Who paid for the silence? Keep asking, keep talking, keep sharing. Make the silence uncomfortable. Make it expensive. Shine the light. Melt the ice. The truth is hidden. Dig.